Trying to make sure we're live before we get into the festivities. Okay. Hello. I think are we live? I don't want to preempt anything, but let's just start. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the final episode of the rest. It's been a long season, but we are here. I'm joined as always by Nathan for the first live episode of the year. Maybe this is a little bit of a teaser for what we can expect next year. But Nathan, how before we start the whole review of the season that has just gone, how are you, mate? How are you feeling?
Yeah, look, I mean, one of those anticlimactic grand finals that unfortunately came around that nobody wants. But yeah, good to have a live show. The last one is our first live show, but yeah, bit of a teaser for what's to come in the future.
Potentially, it's gonna be a good ride this episode. Nonetheless, I hope everyone is enjoying their lovely Wednesday afternoon. But before we actually crack into the review of the grand final and then the season, we'll wait for a few more people to flood in for that. But how was your grand final day? Do you have what was your festivities for the afternoon? Because the weather held out surprisingly. The forecast wasn't looking too good, but it held out. So how was your Saturday?
Look, I'm one of those who I've done it for a long time now, where I've get up at 8:30, chuck on Channel 7. Don't really enjoy what's on Channel 7 as much, but I just want to be around it as early as I can. And I pretty much sit myself in front of a TV all day. People come over, have a bit of a sausage sizzle for lunch, but watch Charles Curnow kick the longest kick, and before you know it, 2:30, and we're watching, and it's just happened.
That was. I mean, it's good. We finally won something on grand final day.
I
Before I
know.
start, Robbie, thank you very much for the $3. Thank you very much. Yeah, Kerno kicking the longest or having the longest kick was quite funny. Finally won something on grand final day, and yeah, Fox are doing all right with the kind of pre-game hype up and all this stuff. Also, another interesting thing: the sprint happened before the game and wasn't really publicized or anything. That's confusing. That's weird to me.
It was odd. It just like came back from the break and they were running, and yeah, wasn't terrific, but that's something surely comes back next year. You gotta take on board what people are saying, and didn't like it. Did not like it.
Yes, of course. But let's before we start. Actually, the pre-game entertainment was top class. I'm not one to normally indulge in that, but Robbie Williams and Delta smashed it as everyone expected them to. But let's crack into the game. And what were your thoughts heading into like the first bounce type of thing? Or did you expect either team to get off to a good start, or did you think any team needed to get off to a good start, or for their sake anyway? I felt Sydney needed to get off to a good start, and they didn't. But it was a pretty sluggish opening 10, wasn't it?
Well, everything I predicted completely was wrong. In all honesty, I said Sydney would get off to a quick start and did not get off to a quick start. I mean, it was interesting in the sense that Sydney just really didn't bring anything in that first quarter. And from what we saw, it looked like the occasion got to them. They simply were too focused on right then, right now, instead of just, sort of building up from everything they'd done previously and taking that into this game. But no, Geelong did what they needed to do. They really brought it to Sydney, and it was pretty much game over by quarter time, which for a neutral was no fun. But all those Cats supporters were probably having the time of their lives 30
Yeah.
minutes into that game, really.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it didn't really turn into a blowout, maybe up until halfway through the third quarter, but it just felt that pretty much halfway through the first, the Cats would dominate. Of course, Hawkins kicked the first two in typical Tom Hawkins fashion, taking out of the ruck. He's probably one of the best in the comp at those 450 ruck stoppages. I think it was Will Hayward getting the first for the Swans. When he kicked that, I thought they might be on, but I think Isaac Smith kicked 3 goals for the rest of the quarter or something like that, and just yeah, it was domination from start to finish. The Cats just looked too strong. Like it was quite underwhelming, quite anticlimactic in a sense, but in a good way for the Cats. They were just way too good, and yeah, it was a shame because really these two teams should be the best in the comp, like the two best teams in the comp, but it just didn't show that on the weekend. The Cats were looked like men against boys, which is what they've done to a lot of teams this season.
They were just on from the start, and I didn't think they'd be able to replicate what they did against Brisbane, um, purely just because Brisbane seemed like they were just exhausted from the week before. But I think that experience really took them over the line in the end. You just saw how composed they were in all those pressured situations. Every contested ball, there was a Geelong player first to it. And that whole thing of, you want it more, it was really on display on Saturday afternoon, and you couldn't question anyone's intent in the blue and white.
Yeah, if I feel like this, maybe not sentiment has been thrown out a lot, but the idea of the occasion getting to the young Swans, if this Sydney list is maybe 3-4 years older, do you think they handle it a bit better? And do you think the game goes a bit differently, or do you think the Cats are just too good? Because to me, it looked like you could have put any team out there on the park, and the Cats were just in some like flow state. They weren't going to be stopped by any team, but it looked to me anyway.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. It was, you can look at it both ways and just say that Geelong really were never going to be stopped. Whether if Sydney, the younger boys are a couple of years older, look, you don't know if it's going to make a difference, because if they still haven't played a grand final, you still don't have that grand final experience. Being a couple of years older, I guess you're better with skill, and just, naturally you're going to be a better player. But I definitely didn't think the age of the Swans helped going into this grand final. I thought it would help them across 4 quarters, but obviously just general experience, especially that most of that group hadn't actually won a grand final. That I think, like the only thing I can think of right now is Luke Parker, that was there in that 2012 one. The others, is the couple were there for the 14 and 16 losses. So they were actually quite inexperienced in terms of winning one, which, and Geelong, polar opposite. They were a team that at least most of them had a taste before. They had 2020, but they didn't get blown out in 2020. That was pretty good for 3 quarters, and then obviously Richmond ran away with it, but experience really just came through. And yeah, combination of what you said as well, they just weren't going to be stopped in that rhythm of just absolutely pummeling every contested ball and every stoppage. They were just there, and Sydney couldn't stop them.
Yeah, it seemed like they couldn't get anything going. I mean, we're just speaking. I feel like there's no real way to analyze this game, because it was really just the same thing for 4 quarters. Geelong dominated, kept the ball in their front half, and every time there would be a defensive 50 clearance for the Swans, it'd fall into the lap of Tom Stewart or Sam De Koning or whoever, College Asney, take your pick, Zach Tilley. They were all there. They were all picking them off, and it really showed. It showed the class that we all thought Geelong had, and we all expect these experienced sides to have that class and that silky, just smooth nature to them. But the more the game happened, like the more the game progressed, the more we saw that. And yeah, it started from minute one, started in pretty good fashion, and it doesn't help from a Sydney perspective when Buddy isn't really getting into the game at all. Probably, ironically, in his past 2 weeks, he's played, or in his past 2 games, he's played, or sorry, not even the Brisbane game. Oh no, the Melbourne game even. My apologies. The Melbourne game and the grand final, probably 2 of his worst games that he's played in his career, which isn't good. Isn't good for Sydney's perspective, and even for his legacy, it isn't great. Isaac Heaney didn't really get anywhere near it. You'd expect a player like him to rise on the big occasions. He wasn't cited at all, pretty much. Pretty much apart from Chad Warner, who proved himself to be a genuine superstar. I mean, when you're doing that, I think like something like 28 kick 2 in a losing side, it shows how good he will be. But he was really only the only standout player for the Swans, in my opinion, unless you can think of anyone else.
I thought Parker did pretty well, considering he had a good enough game to at least be up there. But yeah, Chad Warner just stood out start to finish, and especially considering he was one of the youngest, like, makes it even more impressive at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's a lot of storylines to come out of the game. Of course, the Selwood goal. We'll touch on his retirement after this. That was a pretty good moment. Sam DeConing kicking his first career goal, getting a bit of a Joe the Goose out the back. You love to say that. Just the backman getting in on the fun, and of course, just so many other just really kind of fitting moments of Isaac Smith winning the Norm Smith. One of the players that kind of typified this whole retirement home thing that has been circulating around Geelong and this whole rhetoric around them being too old, too slow, etc. He kicked four, I think kicked three at least, and really tore the game apart. Well deserved, Norm Smith, in my opinion. And Patrick Dangerfield gets his elusive premiership medal, which really, if he hadn't have got, it would be a pretty big blemish on his CV. But he's got it. Played well in it. Played well in the game as well. So that was his second chance at a flag, and he got it on the second time. Second time round, he avenged his pretty poor performance in 2020. It just seemed to be all the stars aligning for the Cats.
Well, I think as well what helped with the Cats going into the game, and I heard pre-game Dangerfield speak, that whole visualization of, you know, seeing yourself up there on the podium with a medal. I think their mentality was real, like just straight up, we're going to win this. Like everything's meant to happen. It's just we can't see any other way this game's going to pan out. And I think that's something that really went a long way to just hammering this grand final. And there were sort of no regrets, I think, is probably one of their big things they talked about. Go out there and really give it everything. Because I feel like after that 2020 game, they probably would have left it thinking they really lost an opportunity because they were up. I think they were up by, a good, not a good bit, but an okay lead
4
in that
goals.
grand final. Enough. Yeah. I mean, enough where you really could either go on and build or, it didn't go their way. So I think they made sure, especially in that first quarter, they put them away early. I mean, I thought it was over by quarter time. I don't know what you thought, but it just one of those,
Yeah.
when it's going to happen. And you felt that at quarter time that it just was never going to turn really.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 6 goal margin, a straight 36 points at halftime. My mind is saying Sydney get the first one, Sydney get the second one. It's
Yeah.
back to 4 goals and it's game on, especially with 2 quarters to go and especially with players like Heaney, Papley, Buddy, who can turn it on in a flash. I didn't think the Swans were out of it at halftime. I thought it'd take something special, but I think the Cats kicked the first 3 of the second half, and from that moment on, it was pretty hard to look past them. They skipped out to a pretty healthy lead, and they just kind of coasted for the best part of a quarter and a half. I like the elite. So I liked seeing your Dangerfield, your Selwood, your Hawkins, your Duncans, these really established players getting that premiership medal, and really riding off to the sunset. So congratulations to the Cats. I'm not sure there's a lot more we can speak about. That game because it was kind of just the same from minute 1 to minute 120. But yeah, congrats to the Cats. Probably the best team all year. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean they proved it ladder wise, and I'm a supporter of, well, I'm not a supporter, but like I'm a fan of whoever finishes first should win the premiership. I don't like teams who finish third, fourth, sort of winning it unless it's a very close season. But if you finish first, I feel like it's tough to go down, especially in a grand final when you've done 23 rounds of the hard work just for it to slip away in the last 4, which is what they've tended to have done. But they definitely start to finish best team all year.
Yeah, no doubt. And the Swans, I mean, still young. They've got time on their side, which helps. Yeah, they've still got time. They've still got some players who are still yet to hit their prime. I mean, we spoke about Chad Warner, and then they have some experience with Buddy and the like. However, there's one thing that I skipped over my mind, which I think would be pretty negligible to not touch on. It was the Max Holmes and Sam Reid issues pre-game. Now,
Yeah.
Geelong bit the bullet and made that late change. Sydney took the risk and kept him in. I guess we saw a bit of a microcosm of the whole game. Geelong's decision planned out. The Swans didn't. Sam Reid was subbed off at halftime and was pretty absent for the half that he played. Yeah, I mean, hindsight's a beautiful thing, but I guess it's pretty clear to see the Cats got it right. The Swans didn't. Pretty stiff on Max Holmes not to get that medal though. If yeah, so stiff considering the manner in which Geelong won in the prelim. It's a bit stiff, isn't it?
Well, it does, all those questions arise again of does everyone deserve a medal, all this stuff. And look, it is tough. I think for someone as well that was featured in that final series. Now, on the medal argument, I reckon anyone who featured in that final series at least should be eligible for a medal, considering it's, the most important time. But with Reid, personally, I thought it was very selfish. And I know this is looking back in hindsight, it's hard to not say that. But to put your team under that risk because he was definitely never confident, and it was quite obvious straight away he was never full strength. I just thought it was a really selfish move, especially when someone like Logan McDonald, who's been there 90% of the year, played most of the games, gets the cut. And I understand it was all tactical for Logan McDonald to come out, but I just didn't like that. I thought it just in terms of what the Swans stand for and the whole Bloods culture, and it's very team orientated. I thought that was the complete opposite. Considering he's got a premiership as well. Like it's not like he hasn't tasted success. So in hindsight, selfish move. But if they'd won, we wouldn't have been sitting here saying it was selfish. So obviously it's result dependent, but on the result, selfish move.
Yeah, hindsight's a beautiful thing. Yeah, it's one of those things. I agree with you on the medal debate. By the way, I think at least more than the 22 that played should deserve the medal. In what capacity that is, whether it's you have to play 5 games, 10 games, appear in the final series, whatever. I think it should be more than the 22 because it's more than the 22 that win it for a club, right? So, yeah, that's just my 2 cents on that. And yeah, I agree. I think if he were to have his time again, I think he would obviously change it. And I would like to think if he had his time again without knowing the result, he would still change it because I just don't think it was the right decision. I don't think it was quite clear that it wasn't the right decision. So we've lost Nathan for a bit, but he's coming back. Here he is.
Okay.
Oh, good. Yeah, just right decision or wrong decision. In my opinion, right decision for Max Holmes, in my opinion. I mean, we don't know what he was looking at. It was a late out, so he was named. So, yeah, stiff on him, though. Very stiff. But I guess that's the nature of the beast and it's the nature of footy. But let's move on because I was expecting to speak about this game for a lot more than only 20 minutes, considering. Yeah. But considering that the manner in which the game had come and gone, I don't think we can. Let's touch on Joel Selwood ever so briefly because I think we all knew that he was going to retire. I think we all knew that, especially his reaction to that goal that he kicked. It seemed pretty obvious that he was done. And he didn't even announce it. I thought he would announce it on stage. I think that'd be a pretty good way to go out, but he didn't. It was announced at 1:00 today. He has hung up his boots. Fantastic career. Just a real start to finish. Just he's experienced success in a lot of areas, hasn't he? He's been a stalwart of the Geelong Footy Club and has pretty much been there and been the staple of the Geelong Footy Club ever since he's walked through the doors.
Well, it's any junior boy's dream, really, to have that type of career where you're just drowned in success for really your whole time there. And he's really a staple what that footy club is about. And, just what you said about how he didn't announce it on stage, I think that goes to show that takes away the selfish part of him because I think he probably would have perceived it as a bit of a selfish thing to just make it about him on that stage. But he made it about that team, the city itself, the supporters, all of that. And it was just a career from start to finish that was just really all about success and team culture and building something that was sustained, and it obviously was sustained. I think the craziest stat that came out of it, I think he won more finals games than I think St Kilda have actually played in.
If that's true, then fucking
I'm not gonna say it's fact, but I know it's very close. Like it's either equal or one above. So that was a pretty
Oh,
insane
yeah.
stat reading.
All I know is that it's going to take another 2,100 days for him to have experienced more birthdays than finals wins, something along those lines, which is a
Yeah, that
pretty
is pretty
insane stat.
insane. That is
So
flying.
it goes to show just how solid he's been. He hasn't necessarily been the best player in his team in the comp, but he's just been so reliable, so just present every single time the Cats are playing in a big game. He's always there. He's always showing up. He's always proving how good he is, and really one of the toughest players I've ever seen. How many photos of him with strapping on his face, blood pouring out of his nose, out of his mouth, out of everywhere. Yeah, just a player that every club wants to have on their team. He's just a fantastic stalwart of the competition, and Geelong are very lucky to have him. But also have had him, I guess I should say.
Yeah, and there was a special moment I think afterwards as well, seeing him with Sammy, the boy with Down syndrome, after the game as well. Like back to the whole community club scene. It's just inclusivity at its best. So it was great to see that moment at the end as well.
Yeah, that was fantastic. That was yeah, very very touching moment. But and his press conference earlier today is filled with some very funny stories, which I urge everyone to go and seek out if they can. But let's finish. I think that's enough of the grand final. Was a bit of a fizzer. Touched on Joe Selwood. Let's wrap up like we've done with the grand final. Let's wrap up the actual season now. Should go through a little some talking points. I think these are pretty much all the talking points that we covered in our mid-season review. A little bit more as well. So let's go with a good old fashioned coach of the year. Now, do you want me? I'll start. I'll start with mine, and through gritted teeth, I think, and I hesitate to even talk about this club anymore. But it is Craig McRae as my coach of the year. Now, it's hard to dismiss him. It's hard to overlook him because what Craig McRae was able to do with that Collingwood side is close to phenomenal. If it isn't, you can say what you want about them being lucky, like 11 wins by under 2 goals or whatever you want. You can say that they're lucky all you want, but you make your own luck. You make your own luck. They got into those positions, and you don't make a prelim by luck. Let's be honest. And yeah, you got to tip your hat to him. You got to tip your hat to that Collingwood team because without him, they probably wouldn't be here. And he single handedly turned the outlook for that club around in a matter of 12 months. So yeah, I think it's going to be hard to overlook Craig McRae as coach of the year, but he was awarded that during the week as well. So or even last week, I think it might have been. But yeah, Craig McRae coach of the year through gritted teeth, but I think it's well deserved.
Well, I'm gonna, throw something else just because I don't want to say the same thing. I'll look at it another way. I'll say Justin Longmuir more so because he took that. I mean, that Freo team was, you could see there was something happening, but I think, and I can say this from our own club, he got them, he made that jump and did it really well with that team who could have fallen away just because it is tough. It's tough to make that transition from being quite terrible for a couple of years and then moving up into that top 8 and playing consistently enough to earn yourself the top 8 spot. And he's built something with that team. Like honestly, I would say Craig McRae as well, but just to give another perspective, another choice, I would just say in terms of the whole season, just goals and objectives achieved, I think Justin Longmuir is another candidate that was just very good. I wouldn't say coach of the year, but just overall a very good job on his bar.
Yes. Okay. Let's go to the second point. Match of the year. Now, again, it features Collingwood. Jesus Christ! I mean, do we really have to speak about them anymore? But funnily enough, it's a game that they lost, and it's the qualifying final against Geelong. I just think that game had everything. I think it had everything. MCG, Twilight was it? I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, MCG Twilight started in the day, finished at night. Come from behind, like taking the lead off each other so many times. Late goals, yeah, just had everything for me. And another one is the Geelong Richmond game from earlier this year where Jack Henry kicks the winning goal with a minute to go. They're my two, but if I had to say, it'd be the qualifying final. between Geelong and Collingwood.
I'm going to go with, unfortunately, I'm just looking at this through a neutral lens. I'm going to go with the last round. Carlton Collingwood was another one. Had everything in terms of I don't think you'll see in a long time again a game like a regular season game that had that much of stake for both teams. It was hectic as a supporter watching, but I think as a neutral, just 88,000 for a round 23 clash. It was just full on, and it was sort of what you want AFL to be about. And you live for these moments as supporters, players. It's one of those big games, and I think the end result, even though unfavourable for Carlton supporters, it was probably the best outcome through neutral to see a game that close with that much at stake in the end.
Yeah, and I mean with our next talking point, I think we're going to have to bring up Collingwood again because they're not leaving us, are they? Biggest jumpers of the season. Now, I mean, if you want to speak about it literally in terms of where they finished last year to where they finished this year, you can as well. But I think it's hard to go past Collingwood. I also want to give a special mention to the Dockers as well because I really am a fan of the way they play. I'm a fan of what they're about. But yeah, the Pies just. Gee, can we finish? Can we enough of them? Right? No more speaking about them. No, they're credit where credit is due. You have to give credit where credit's due. As much as once again through gritted teeth, they deserve what they got this year. You make your own luck, and you put yourself in the position to be where they were. You can say all they want. You can say whether or not they'll maintain it next year. You can say whatever you want, but the fact of the matter is they made a prelim, they made top four, and you don't do that if you don't deserve it. So credit to them. They're by far, in my opinion, the biggest jumpers of the season.
Look, you give me not much to work with, don't you? Look, obviously is Collingwood. Another one. I'm just going to talk about someone else that's not the biggest jumper, but just a honourable mention. I'm going to say the Suns did pretty good this year, and I guess they've got a list that they probably need to sustain if they're to go anywhere. If they start to fall away again, you're going back, really just starting that cycle. But that team proved they could lift in big games. The downfall is that they couldn't do it anywhere else but the Gold Coast in reality. And I think that will be really the determining factor between them making finals and not, because I don't know how many of their 10 wins came from the Gold Coast, but I would assume 6 or 7 of them. So they're on the right track, I thought. And I think they did what they needed to, because they really could have had another season of finishing 15th to 18th and get draft picked 1 to 3 and repeat, recycle. But they did what they need to do. It's whether they really can just win in Melbourne next year.
Yes, that's the thing. I think in order to, I mean, the last game of the season's in Melbourne, right? So you need to win in Melbourne at some stage if you want the ultimate glory. Yeah, I do love the way the Suns go about things. It's a very finally seems to be turning for them. They had that period in the maybe 2014, 2015 where something starting to come from there, but now we're finally starting to see hopefully something pretty good. But with the biggest jumpers, let's go with the biggest sliders. And for me, it was between 3, but I think one of the clubs did enough in the back end of the season to not allow me to say this. But I'm going to go with the Bombers. Now, from what they were last year, which was a finals team, a team that was playing exciting football, to see where they fell to this year, pretty disappointing. And to see the uncertainty around the coach, around the board, around pretty much everything at that football club, it's quite concerning from a neutral's perspective. God knows what's going to happen with them next year. But yeah, my biggest sliders are the Bombers. They just couldn't replicate what they did last year. Maybe it was a tougher fixture. Maybe it was some injuries, players out of form, whatever. But yeah, maybe a few people would have seen this coming based on how they got into the finals last year. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where they go from here. But yeah, the biggest sliders for me are the Bombers.
It's a tough one because I'm guessing the second team was Port Adelaide, you were going to say?
The Giants, actually.
Okay, well, the Giants is a team I was going to say. And I guess Port, if you look at ladder position, is the biggest slider, but I think it was bound to happen. I had Port out of my top 8 at the start of the season. I just thought they lost their opportunity and it was gone. And I didn't think they'd mentally recover from it well, and they didn't in the end. Yeah, I would say GWS, and I had them in my top 8, embarrassingly, looking back, just with the talent they had. And, in honesty, the talent the AFL had probably not gifted them, but we know they didn't do it the hard way, GWS. That, I guess 2019 really has killed that team. And it was just sort of evident last year, but I thought they'd bounce back and they didn't. They just fell apart really, and I think it's back to square one for them. Unfortunately, they just collapsed after 19.
Yeah, it's one of those things, and I mean, funnily enough, it could happen to the Swans. I don't think it will, but that haunting feeling in the back of your mind can really have a massive effect on you. Obviously, fresh start with Kingsley next season. Hopefully it turns around for them, because they've got some good players and they've got some players that can really make a difference. But let's move on to let's change direction completely now, and let's speak on something which to be honest with you, no one really wants to speak about, but it's too high profile not to. It is of course the whole allegations and the report that has come out regarding the Hawthorn Football Club within or in the time period between, I would assume, the early 2010s. I'm assuming that's the time period around. There's been a lot of allegations thrown around within that report about things that have happened to First Nations people regarding their families and regarding connections with them, with their family. I mean, before we actually speak about it, I didn't want to speak about it. I really wanted this to just be a very wholesome end to the season, but it's too hard not to. Too high profile. It's too big of a story not to. Like my immediate reaction when I woke up and saw it was, I just can't believe this is happening, and I can't believe this has come out. It's just one of those things which has reminded us yet again that we're still very, very far behind where we need to be.
Yeah, it's a weird one, and probably the weird thing about my day is that I read it and then I was on my way to court for a uni assignment, so I thought there was a bit of weird correlation in those two things. It's just frustrating, and it's frustrating. I think, like, I'm a bit disappointed it came out to the general public and not. I think this should have been really dealt behind closed doors. And I only say that because I feel like, especially if this gets taken further, the public have so much interest in it like now, and that it's so out there that how can you, if this ever goes further, the court, how does this affect the way it's judged? And it's just a disappointing thing to hear about. Just frustrating that there was, I don't know, they haven't accepted what's been said, so there's no accountability. Makes it worse for them if these allegations are true. I mean, it's not our position to say whether they are true or not. It's just a terrible situation. Like, no, it takes away the whole thing of football being a community thing, and it's just separated. And who knows how long ago this is, but it's something that unfortunately probably we can't say that it's not happening now. You never know if it's still happening now. So it just is all over the place, that situation.
Yeah, and I think the most disappointing thing that has come out of it in my books is obviously the people involved. You feel for them immensely. Like, this is, especially considering what the First Nations people have gone through in the past with the whole stolen generation. For this to have happened is like so heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to all of them that have been affected in this circumstance in particular. But what I've now thought of and has made me even more disappointed is that I can't only see it happening in this one case. I think if it's happening at one club, the chances of it happening at another club, and then another club, and then another club, unfortunately, it's too high for me not to be concerned about it. Put it that way. It's just so disappointing. Of course, the two main people, if you were to call it that, or the two people that have been heavily linked to this, of course, Alistair Clarkson and Chris Fagan, both. Alistair Clarkson was meant to start his new role at North Melbourne in November 1st, I believe. That is now being postponed, or not postponed, but has now been. It won't commence November 1st, pending the investigation, and of course, Chris Fagan has stepped away from his role as senior coach, if pending the investigation as well. Clarkson released a statement today. To be honest, I haven't really had a chance to read it. It was quite long, but I would assume that it's from what I've read and from what I've heard about it is kind of acknowledging, maybe not acknowledging, but defending his side of things, and is being very non-committal, and isn't wanting any confrontation from this, from what I've read. But yeah, these allegations are of course very serious, and it calls into question the integrity of that. Let's just assume it was that period from '08 to 16. It questions the integrity of that success, and it really tarnishes it, because there's no doubt a lot of good people in that club that will have their greatest success in their definitely in their professional lives now tarnished because of this horrible thing that has happened. If the allegations are true.
Well, if the allegations are true, they shouldn't be in a job. I mean, it's near criminal what they did in a sense. Just, I mean,
Morally.
not a morally, yeah. It's just
Yeah.
criminal. You cannot do that. I mean, I don't know. I'm not confident they would lose their jobs if the allegations are true. I just don't think the AFL clearly
They have
I
to.
don't think they care. I don't think the
They
AFL
have
care
to.
that much.
They have to.
Look, there's multiple incidents throughout the year where we've sat back and think, what have they done? And I mean, the obvious one we can think of as Carlton supporters was the Adelaide game. Nothing happened. It just got dismissed. It was like, oh well, not enough evidence, even though there was what we've heard, there was enough evidence, and it just got dismissed. I, they have to take it seriously because it's actually impacting the AFL this time, not just the supporter group. But I just think it's terrible in a lot of ways. I just don't think really anything will happen to them unless it's really like the allegations, unless they are spot on. I think if there's even a gap in what was said, the AFL will just sort of, push it off to the side and leave it. That's how they
I
treat
think.
this sort of stuff.
I mean, I would love to say you're wrong. I would love to say you're wrong, but there's something in the back of my mind which makes me think that you're going to be right in your assessment of it. I just don't. The fact that Chris Fagan and Alistair Clarkson are both meant to be coaching, are both meant to be the senior coach of teams next year. I mean, just before I say this, God forbid Brisbane actually beat Geelong in the prelim. That would have been
Yeah.
the biggest shitstorm of all time. And
Yeah.
I mean, I know that's the least important bit of this whole thing, but that's just something which I thought of. In my opinion, I don't see a way either of them coach next year. I just, and if not only if these allegations are true, but if they are, I don't see how either of them could be involved in football ever again. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's a bit harsh, but I do believe in second chances. But these are grown men, right? They're adults. We're not talking about a 17, 18, 19-year-old who's made a mistake. This is a concentrated, methodical, systematical, like horrible thing that's happened. This isn't something that has just happened from out of nowhere, from what it seems like anyway, from what we've heard in terms of the allegations. I heard the word like they ran the club like a mafia. That's been thrown around, and if these allegations are true, I don't think that either of them can coach a senior team ever again. In my opinion, I mean the closest thing in terms of saga we've had to this is the Essendon saga, but in my opinion, this blows that out of the water. I know it's not a competition. I know that's once again the least important thing of this whole scenario, but it's really not even a joke. Like it's you can't poke fun at them, in my opinion, because this is so serious and this is so impactful for the whole club. Like Hawthorn supporters are hurting because of this, and it's not their fault. Like it's the fault of a couple of people in power, which it shouldn't be the case. Like the fact that so many more, like of course you have the direct victims of this, are the people involved and the people that have had these things said and done to them. And then you have everyone else who will suffer the consequences of this in terms of people that have worked there, people that played in that era that had nothing to do with this, their reputations tarnished just by virtue of being associated with this organization at this time. Yeah, it's just shocking, utterly shocking, and this season has ended on a bad note because this investigation is ongoing. We don't know what's going to come of it. I'm sure it'll. I'm sure I don't know if it'll be resolved anytime soon, but there's got to be some. Assuming these allegations are true, and we can't assume anything because there needs to be a due process, of course, and both sides need to do their um, due processes and what have you. But if they are true, one of the darkest periods in the Hawthorn Football Club and in AFL in general, because it's almost out of a movie type thing of how it's almost as if a human being couldn't like I don't understand how this has happened with a group of people doing this. It seems like this has to be like scripted to like create narrative, but like yeah, that's how it seems like. This can't be real, but if the allegations are true, unfortunately it is, and that's the worst part.
I mean, you've summed it up pretty well there, haven't you?
Sorry,
it's just
yeah,
it's terrible. It's just something that, look, we say we shouldn't, like it was a surprise, but maybe if we look back in history, is it a surprise? I think it's a surprise only because it came out of that club. But the AFL, it's not a surprise that it's come out of an organisation that doesn't really take it that seriously, and putting out a statement that says the AFL doesn't condone this. Well, good for you. Obviously, that shouldn't have to be said. That shouldn't have to be said that you don't condone it. Like that isn't that just like
obvious,
an unwritten thing that you should not be racist. Everyone is equal. That's just an unsaid thing. Yeah, look, this. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen out of this?
Yeah, I think this goes back to the thing of, yeah, no one should be racist, obviously. I think it's now time to change that sentiment and be, okay, now we all need to be anti-racist. And we all need to make a conscious effort to stop this from happening and to allow our society to grow. Because we've spoken about this I can't even remember how many times we've spoken about similar incidents in terms of racial or anti-Semitic or whatever type things that have happened this year in 2022. I know these obviously happened not this year, in years prior, but like yeah, I really didn't want to end this season on a downer, but I feel like we had to speak about it, and it's very frustrating, but it is what it is. The investigation will happen. Hopefully some harsh punishments are handed down if the allegations are true, and hopefully this is a stark reminder to not only the footy world but to Australian society that we are a long way back, a long way behind where we need to be.
Yeah, spot on. It's just not the right direction, but yeah, it sort of left speechless about it. It's just so odd. Not the way we wanted to end the season at all, but it had to have been said. It would have been frustrating for this stuff to have just never come out because it never solves the issue. But we hope whoever's involved is, gets the reward, not reward, but something comes out of it that is positive moving forward.
Yeah, and get the help and just the assistance and the guidance through this that they need. I think that's the most important thing that has come from all of this. I think let's move on. Let's try and end this season, or this episode, this final episode of the season, on a little bit of a higher note. The moment of the round. Now we spoke about it. Really, it's Joel Selwood's goal. Like, I know you could speak about a couple of things, but a lot of moments from that game. But Selwood kicking the goal, and of course what we've come to find out his retirement, that makes that moment even sweeter. But moment of the year. Now, we've done this moment of the round throughout this whole thing, and moment of the year, I feel like in my mind, I already know what mine is, and it's quite fitting that it goes all the way back full circle to round one. My moment of the year is Sam Doherty kicking his goal in his
I
return
knew you
game.
were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. You put me under the bus every time. Oh, look,
Mate,
yes,
mate,
obviously Sam Doherty
yeah,
going on.
great minds think alike. That's all I can say. Yeah, it had to be right. It's quite fitting how it's come full circle like that. But yeah, Sam Doherty. I mean, we've spoken about it. We spoke about it at length when it happened. We've spoken about it at length various times throughout the season. What he went through, what he's overcome, and where he got to, and where he now is at the present day. Phenomenal achievement. And then this goes throughout. You have Ben Cunnington as well, returning to AFL football after suffering something very similar. Michael Hurley kicking a goal, returning to AFL football, and then you had so many other moments. Which, if you want to rattle off, if you can remember, then be my guest. But yeah, Sam Doherty is my moment of the year.
Yeah, look, you don't leave me a lot to think about there. Look, because my Carlton mind would say Cripps in the Brownlow, but in terms of a moment of the year, that was football, exactly, the actual football. I'd say it's a really tough one. It's such a tough one. I don't know. I really don't know a moment of the year that's not that, I guess. That one, I
Maybe
think just.
I
What are
was
you
going
going
to
to
say
say?
Jamie Elliott, Jamie Elliott after the siren, or Noah Anderson
Yeah,
after the siren.
both of those are pretty good. Pretty good. Yeah, yes, I'll say that. I'll say that one. I'll say
Okay.
Jamie Elliott after the siren against Essendon. That is mine.
Yeah, there you go. All right, great. All right. Thank you all very much. I think that's it. I think we're done for not only this episode, but for the year. Thank you all very much for watching. Thank you all very much for tuning in throughout the year. It's been an honor for both me and Nathan to be appearing once a week, talking shit for 45 minutes. It's really one of the highlights of my week. Thank you all very much for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the Little Broad YouTube channel. Make sure you like the video. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you everyone who tuned in live for the final time this season. See you guys next time. Well, next time, maybe next year. See you guys next year, and goodbye.